You're reading from a number of articles, and of course, the main post of the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team report, Resolution 2734, which is concerning the terrorist groups Islamic State and Levant, Al Qaeda, and associated individuals and entities. It was a report posted in February of uh, 2025. Now, it's really interesting to note that the threats posed uh, by these groups and individuals have basically um, been in existence for a while now. But the problem is that the State Department has no longer given any attention whatsoever to the growing transition between groups like the Islamic State or Al Qaeda or the Taliban. And uh, more resoundingly absurd is the fact that we have supported the overthrow of Bashar al Assad, the tyrant, the dictator, and in replacement, we've given power of the country's government over to a wanted terrorist in Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, the leader of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group, basically an al-Qaeda affiliate. As absurd as that sounds, it's not so absurd when you think about back in 2011, the United States supported the overthrow of Assad through a CIA program that was supported by countries like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, called Timber Sycamore, which is a multi-million dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons aid and training programs to jihadist networks. And it was later on the State Department basically said, well, we didn't know, we didn't support the Islamic State, but it doesn't fucking matter when you have small little affiliate groups that basically coexisted now and basically now make up for the government of Syria. I thought we were fighting the war on terror. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. So, with U.S. foreign policy basically dictating the pace of the Middle East and Asia, we have now seen the ramifications of what this can do to us in the long run. And when I say us, I'm meaning the civilians of the United States of America. Just like with 9/11 attacks, the State Department basically said they hate us for our freedoms, right? As if jihadists just born out of nowhere and basically said, well, we're going to attack the country because women have rights, or that the Christians are need to be overthrown because they're a threat to the Islamic Caliphate. I mean, if you ever look at the videos of Osama bin Laden and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, Muhammad Atta, and Ramzi Youssef, read these transcripts. They all basically say we're attacking the United States and the West because of U.S. foreign policy. It's it's because they don't want to tell you the truth that the actions are what precipitate a reaction, right? And if we improve on our foreign policy, these groups most likely really wouldn't exist as a threat to the U.S. national security. So after 24 years of the September 11 attacks, what I want to do is read from a couple of articles and offer my thoughts about certain things. And one of them is from the Ali Soufan Institute, the Ali Soufan Center, which is a great resource of current threat matrices and reports from former FBI agent Ali Soufan, who's a hero in my eyes, who basically tried to stop and gain intelligence regarding the Malaysia summit meeting of Al Qaeda terrorists that was withheld from him and the FBI, from the CIA and the NSA. And God knows if there's foreign intelligence involved with that as well. It wouldn't shock me. But as you can see here, September 11, 2024, 23 years to the date of the September 11 attacks, 23 years after 9/11, what does the terrorist threat facing the U.S. look like? And it's a great question, right? So I want to read you the main talking points of the article. I'm not going to go over the articles. I got a lot of articles and want to show you that, are they're going to make sense as the main emphasis point. All right. The main point is that Is there a threat to the West regarding Islamic fundamentalist organizations? Yes, there is. And I'll tell you why. 23 years after the devastating Al Qaeda terrorist attacks in September 11th, the threat facing the United States is more diverse than ever. I did an interview with Sarah Adams and an informant, okay, regarding the book Al Qaeda 2.0. And Sarah Adams said something very interesting, which is outlined in the book, that Al Qaeda learned from their mistakes about alienating from other Islamist groups. They were more wanted to be out in the open. They wanted to be shown as, oh, we're doing this, right? Whereas now Al Qaeda is more refrained from being the face. They don't want to be the face. They want to hide in the shadows, and that they want to coexist with other groups. And this aligns well with the unofficial emir of Al Qaeda, Hamza bin Laden. Now, some say it's Saif al-Adil, Hamza bin Laden, but they never officially named an emir. I don't even think Al Qaeda said anything about the death of Ayman al-Zawahiri, the latest, the one that was killed in Kabul, in Afghanistan, the last emir. Al Qaeda is a much different organization today than it was 2 decades ago. And some of its regional affiliates growing in strength, especially its branches and franchise groups throughout the sub-Saharan Africa, including Al-Shabaab in Somalia and Jamaat Nusra al-Islam, while Muslimin in the Sahel. And don't forget about Boko Haram and the Tehrik-e-Taliban in Pakistan, or the TTP, or the Haqqani Network, or the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and whatever's left of the Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia, which is now defragmented, but it'll take some time. Abu Sayyaf, which is defragmented, but they haven't publicly asserted that they were going to dissolute like Jemaah Islamiyah has. But those, a lot of those individuals are basically just going to go elsewhere to join. The Islamic State in Khorasan, which is the enemy to the Taliban, is among the most dangerous terrorist groups currently in the world, fighting to keep foothold in Afghanistan. I don't believe this. I don't think the Islamic State Khorasan is the most dangerous terrorist group in the world. I think it's the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Taliban, and Al Qaeda. That's what I think. Islamic State Khorasan is doing what Al Qaeda tried to do in Afghanistan in the mid '90s, or the Taliban did, try to reorganize and become a formidable organization. I don't think they're going to be an international threat like Al Qaeda used to be, right? They don't got the manpower for it, nor do they got the financing for it. Not to say that they are a threat. In terms of lone wolf attacks, yeah, but whoopie do. I'm talking about sporadic attacks that are meant to be a threat to the civil liberties of everyday Americans, right? Violent, that's what this video is about. I'm not talking about lone wolf attacks attributed to Islamic State. If, say, some old woman in Idaho fell off a ladder, the Islamic State's going to take credit for it. And I remember, just 7 to 10 years ago, during that period, when there was lone wolf attacks and attributed to Islamic State members who were unofficially accredited, they always took credit. Violent non-state actors, including terrorists, insurgents, and militias, are currently seeking new ways to innovate, embracing emerging technologies, and working to harness unmanned aerial systems, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, and other methods of enhancing their lethality. So it's a long article. I will post it in the tab below. But I want to point out something here, right? This is interesting. Something I was thinking about the other day, that far-right extremists also pose a threat to the United States, including neo-Nazi white supremacist networks and groups such as the Base, the Atomwaffen Division, and the Russian Imperial Movement, the Nordic Resistance Movements, and others. The United States has moved to designate several of these groups while working to dismantle networks of supports that underpin racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists worldwide. Far-right groups exist because they feel that the liberals or the leftists, the socialists, the communists, the atheists, the homosexuals, these are all a threat to the white ethno-state, right? Or the Caucasian ethno-state, the Christian, ethno-state, right? and that they'll work with intermittently with radical jihadist groups because they have a common enemy, right? The Jew, right? The Jewish person. And that's where a lot of these far right extremist groups have an affinity with these jihadist groups. Is they want to get rid of the Jew because by getting rid of the Jew, they think they're getting rid of the evils that are, infiltrating every fabric of society. And look, make no mistake here. I've pointed this out numerous times that the current anti-Zionist movement, the one that is morally correct, that are speaking out against what the Israeli government's doing through its military to the Gazans, are going to be hijacked by these far-right groups. And they currently are in the United States. I'm not talking about Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. They're cowards, right? Talk about the ones that are making noise, that are going to be born out of the violence of the government. The government's actions are a direct reaction to extremism. Extremism is born out of ignorance and out of an action. The action of what? The action of a violent perpetrator. In this case, the governments of the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the axis of evil, as I really call them. Through their actions, they create the extremist networks around the world. And the extremist networks don't care. They always attack who? Those who are not involved with the government. They never attack Congress. They never attack, the House of Representatives. They always attack public areas. And why? It's because the government could take advantage of this and then, institute abusive or invasive civil liberty laws and legislation. And more money goes into these private military complexes and intelligence services to defeat and destroy or disseminate these extremist networks, but not to the point where they're totally destroyed. Al-Qaeda after 9/11 was decimated. Well, were they totally destroyed? No. Taliban, totally decimated. Were they destroyed? No. And what happens? They reorganize after time because there's a new enemy, the Cold War, right? Iran, Russia, China. And while this fad goes away, who's reorganizing in the background? Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Islamic State, right? Now, I'm going to read to you from the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Report. Now, this is from February of 2025. All right. Now, the report is pursuant to Resolution 1267, but this is a resolution that is basically talking about the current threat matrix to the United States from Islamic organizations around the world. And I'll just read to you from this, right? As you can see here, letter dated February 6th of 2025 from the president of the Security Council acting in absence of the chair of the Security Council Committee pursuant to Resolutions 1267, 1989, and 2253 concerning the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and associated individuals, groups, undertakings, and entities addressed to the President of the Security Council. This is the current threat matrix right here. This is a very important document. I will post this in the tab underneath. Okay. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I will highlight some areas here. And this is, the main preambles, right? So I'm going to go down a little bit. So I'll just read you the hell with it, right? So the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant and affiliates remain resilient and adaptable to external counterterrorism pressure. The threat that they posed remained undiminished. Now, they're still a threat. Agreed. The identity of the Daesh leader, Abu Hafs al-Hashimi al-Qurashi, is unclear, although I think he's the leader. There was growing confidence among other member states that al-Qurashi was Abdul Qadir Mumin, the head of the ISIL in Somalia, but doubts continued to be expressed by member states. Remember back in 2011, 2012, when we overthrew, not directly, but indirectly, the president Muammar Gaddafi in Libya? Remember this. 15 years prior, 20 years prior to the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi, he was the only world leader to have an open warrant on Osama bin Laden, when bin Laden was a growing threat. Okay. Fast forward 20 years, and we destroyed Muammar Gaddafi, the evil, deposed, insidious leader of the Libyan government. How dare he go to the Arab Summit League and basically criticize the United States for overthrowing Iraq? How dare he, right? Meanwhile, Assad is, sitting in the back. He's laughing. Meanwhile, they're both, one's dead and the other one's currently in hiding in Russia, right? But what took their place? The Islamic radical fundamentalist groups that didn't exist. Then they're going to be a threat. Now, look, Al Qaeda in Afghanistan in the 90s, Al Qaeda affiliates in Indonesia and the Philippines, and Egyptian Islamic groups like Gamma Islamiyah and Egyptian Islamic Jihad in Egypt. They didn't coexist. They work with themselves indirectly. Later on, Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Al Qaeda joined together. Ayman al-Zawahiri became the second, or the religious emir, the emir of the Shura Council in Al Qaeda. But they really shot themselves in the foot, because bin Laden's ignorance was that, by attacking the United States, he thought that he could drag them into Afghanistan and create, a Russia style theme of the 1970s and 80s. What he basically shot himself in the foot was that the United States basically decimated through the CIA Special Activities Division and U.S. Special Forces, with the help of the rebel tribes from Uzbekistan and Waziristan, and of course the the Afghan alliance, basically decimated Al Qaeda. This was against the preambles of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad under Muhammad al-Faraj, who wrote the book The Neglected Duty, about overthrowing Arab governments, which is the near enemy, to create a caliphate against fighting the far enemy, which is the West, the United States and Israel and the coalition partners. But in order to do that, they needed the caliphate. But that took time. Bin Laden was impatient. That was his fault. Now, fast forward 20 years. What's happening? Caliphate where? In Syria. The president of Syria, Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, is a terrorist. I don't care if he's wearing a suit. Put a suit on a pig, it's still a pig. Jilani is a killer, a mass killer of who? Muslims. He's now the president of Syria. Libya, which is now a hotbed for radical fundamentalist extremism. Iraq, still a radical hotbed for the Islamic State, Khorasan, and Al Qaeda affiliates. Afghanistan, run by who? The Taliban and Al Qaeda. I'm going to get into that in a minute here about, who's there now, currently running things. The Qahtani network. Pakistan, Tehrik al-Taliban, Jaish-e-Mohammed, these groups. They're a threat. Somalia, al-Shabaab. Chad, Nigeria, Boko Haram. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is now the biggest they've ever been. In the Sahel. And just like how Bill Baggio, who's a fantastic counterterrorism analyst, and Sarah Adams, same thing, the best in the country. They predicted that these groups will learn from their mistakes and coexist for the common enemy. And that creates what? The caliphate, right? I mean, they're not there yet, but they're bigger now than they were 20 years ago. Al Qaeda is bigger now than they were 20 years ago. Now, here's the thing: they're not giving out media interviews. They're not telling you who they're going to attack. And so the intelligence, because the United States pulled out of Afghanistan in 2021, we have nothing on the ground. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have intelligence coming out of there. Is it being shared? I'm going to get into that as well. The threat is there, folks. And one of the points that they're raising, these groups, Saif al-Adil, the unofficial leader of al-Qaeda, he's not the leader, he has ridden out of Iran, southern Iran, where he's under house arrest. He's had to sneak out his writings criticizing the U.S. support for Israel and Gaza. Folks, what's happening in Gaza is going to be the main antithesis for attacks here in the States. And if you don't think so, all you have to do is take a look at the transcripts and video interviews of bin Laden and Al Qaeda, like Ayman al Zawahiri in the late 90s, and they will tell you the same thing, that we're attacking the West because the United States are stationed in Saudi Arabia and that they destroyed Iraq in 1990. And of course, the Palestinian situation in Gaza, which is exponentially fucking worse. And of course, look at our foreign policy regarding who? Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Gaza. It's all going to come back to us. All right. The trend continues toward a greater focus by Al Qaeda and Daesh on various regions in Africa. The number of attacks in West Africa remained high, with Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam, while al-Muslimin, the JNIM, and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, expanding the areas of operation. In Africa, it's just, this is the one area that's not being reported on, for the exception of the great analysts over there at the Libertarian Institute, Scott Horton, Kyle Anzalone, and Dave DeCamp, and Connor Freeman and Patrick McFarland, and Will Porter. Saif al-Adil, widely believed to be the de facto global leader of al-Qaeda. I happen to agree with Sarah Adams. It's Hamza bin Laden. He has the bigger name. Saif al-Adil is somebody that was neglected by bin Laden to be a strategic leader. When it was reported in a letter, which was collected through the Abbottabad assassination of bin Laden, they found all the letters. And one of the letters was an Al-Qaeda Islamic State, an Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula leader, Rahman, I think his name was, al-Rahman, where bin Laden basically told him, who should I name as deputy leader? And one of the names was Saif al-Adil, and bin Laden rejected, saying he's not a strategic mind. He published a series of articles trying to exploit the Gaza and Israel conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge, right? Because Al-Qaeda, why would they write about this? Because they're trying to export international terrorism. That means they're already training for it. That operations are going to happen. And what is the motivational factor for this? Gaza, Israel. No more greater motivation than to highlight the massacres of what's going on. And this is the worst of the worst in the Gaza history. And Gaza history is something out of Dante's Inferno. Okay. Right now, what we're experiencing is the worst period in Gaza history ever. You don't think that this is going to be a motivational factor going forward for an act of retribution against those who perpetrated this massacre, the United States. Al Qaeda maintained its ambition for external operations. Huge. They've had 4 years of maintaining an essence in Afghanistan, supported by the Haqqani network. Salahuddin Haqqani, who is the one who hid al-Zawahiri in Kabul, where he was assassinated, actually. Was it on purpose to get rid of him? I don't know. But I want to go down to Asia right here, right? Because there's a lot going on here. And this is really huge. All right. This is according to intelligence reports. All right. Regarding the threat of Al Qaeda and what they're doing regarding their external operations in Afghanistan under the protection of the Taliban. Right. So I want to go down here, not so much about the Islamic State Khorasan, but I want to highlight right here. Okay. The status and strength of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan remained unchanged. The group sought to strengthen cooperation with regional terrorist organizations of non-Afghan origin that operate in the country. That's what Sarah Adams was bang on this. That she said during my interview, which was early in the year, that Al Qaeda will coexist with other groups, and this is really bad because imagine groups like the Islamic State and the Levant, Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the Taliban in Pakistan, the Tahrir al-Sham, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria, all coexisting in creating terrorist attacks against the West. Fuck. If you thought 9/11 was bad, this is worse because we don't even know what's coming. At least with 9/11, we had daily matrix threat reports from the Department of Defense, from the Defense Intelligence Agency, from the CIA, from the NSA, the FBI, right? The Director of National Intelligence, basically sharing information from foreign intelligence about a threat to what? The airline industry. Going as far back as fucking 95, 6 years prior to 9/11. We don't have shit here. Not to say that these, there isn't intelligence regarding these groups. There are. But these groups are basically learning from their past mistakes in that they're not so open anymore. They're acting in commerce covertly. This makes them far more dangerous. Now, the ETIM, TIP, and Jemaat al-Nasrallah, which is not listed in the sanctions report, to expand its presence in neighboring countries. Member states judged Saif al-Adl's strategy to reorganize al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan and reactivate sleeper cells in Iraq, Libya. What did I tell you? The Syrian Arab Republic. Why did we support the overthrow of Assad through radical fundamentalists? Because I'm talking to you, Democrats who supported this fucking nonsense because you had the Ukrainian flag in your bio. How's it working out? Now there's neo-Nazis in southern Russia, northern Ukraine, working in accordance with one another. This is what you created with your dumb war, right? Now we have a jihadist leader leading Syria, a jihadist network leading Afghanistan, and countries that are fighting jihadist groups in Libya and Yemen and Pakistan, and Iraq. I mean, just you wonder if it's a big conspiracy. It's all on purpose. I don't think it works like that. Do I think that foreign policy analysts look 20 years down the line and say, if we do this, this might happen? Yeah. But I think it's a lot about ignorance. I mean, take a look at your average politician. Do you really think that they have a brain? I mean, you look at John Fetterman, Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Margaret Taylor Greene, if you hear them speak, Kamala Harris, you're listening to a fucking idiot. And these are the people in power. Listen, the real people in power are the brains behind these people who facilitate violent acts that create these groups. That's why they don't go in front of a camera. Okay. And reactivate sleeper cells in Iraq, Libya, and the Syrian Arab Republic, and Europe to be indicative of the group's long-term intent to carry out external operations. Huge, right here. Again, huge point. It's indicative of the group's long-term strategy to carry out external operations when you have other extremist groups in other countries working together. Money is being pooled, weapons are being shared, ideas are being shared. Abu Hassan al-Wali deployed Hayas Masad al-Ula, not listed in the sanctions report, to the Kumar province to manage al-Qaeda finances from the Islamic Republic of Iran into Afghanistan. Do not believe that Iran is going to be involved, the government or its military services. Now, why is Iran being mentioned? It goes all the way back. After 9/11, bin Laden split his group into two factions, one into Pakistan, the other into Iran. Iran house arrested his son, Saad bin Laden, and his wife, one of his wives, and a number of Al-Qaeda members. They were under house arrest. In 2006, Time magazine reported this, that Iranian authorities met with U.S. authorities in Europe. I think it was like Finland or Sweden, and basically said that, hey, we got Saad bin Laden. We'll hand him over to you for nothing. Meanwhile, the U.S. support for Iranian war with Israel was really ramping up at that time. And Iran basically said, yeah, give us, 10 million. No, for free, for nothing. U.S. rejected it. Why? Because they want to keep Al-Qaeda in Iran, because later on, we could blame Iran for being supporting the war on terror, the supporter of Al-Qaeda. That's not the case here. And look at all the networks, Fox News, right? All these, right-wing group, even CNN. I can't blame the right on this. Even CNN basically asserted that, Iran is involved with Al-Qaeda. No, only an idiot would say that. Taliban maintained a permissive environment, allowing Al-Qaeda to consolidate with the presence of safe houses and training camps scattered across Afghanistan. And it'll name all the towns that they're in. And I'll point something out. The de facto authorities continue to be sensitive to the profiles of Al-Qaeda personnel in the country. Low-profile members resided with their families under the protection of the Taliban intelligence service, the General Directorate of Intelligence, in Kabul neighborhoods. Where was Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri? In Kabul. Neighborhoods like Kala al-Fatullah, which is east of Kabul, just east, about maybe 30 miles. Shar al-Nawi, which is north of Al-Qaeda. Wazir Ahmed al-Khan. While senior leaders of Al-Qaeda were placed in rural areas outside of Kabul. Why didn't they do that with Zawahiri? Because I think the Taliban wanted Zawahiri dead. This would put enough distance, saying, Al-Qaeda is destroyed. They wouldn't care about the other middle management of Al-Qaeda. That's what I think. I think the Haqqani network did the U.S. a favor here. But Al-Qaeda never acknowledged that he died. So what does it matter? And villages, distant villages of Buguli in the Saudi Pul province, in Kunar, in Ghazni, Logar, and Warduk provinces. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, Al-Qaeda training camps were based in the Paktia province, Kandahar, Nangarhar. That's no longer the case. Who's training in Nangarhar, in Kandahar? Taliban. They switched. Now Al-Qaeda is training in smaller provinces, away from what? In rural areas, away from what? From the prying eyes of the intelligence services. It makes it harder to infiltrate. This is fucking smart. The Haqqani network is ingenious in this. Haqqani network was based in the rural areas of Afghanistan and Pakistan. They were the first organization to accept Arab members into the Afghan war. Two individuals specifically, which helped to create Al Qaeda, Abu Hafs al Masri, later renamed to Mohammed Atef, the military commander of Al Qaeda, but the first military commander of Al Qaeda, Abu Ubaidah al Banshiri. Both were former Egyptian military officers who trained the Egyptian military officers in the 1960s and 70s. Russia, Jordan, Israel, who helped torture the Islamic radical fundamentalist groups like Al Jihad and Gamma Islamiyah in the 80s after the assassination of President Anwar Sadat. Helped to create what? Through torture, radical fundamentalists like Ayman al Zawahiri. Everything is a branch out effect. All right. Now, the Taliban moved Abu Ikhlas al Masri, who's not listed in the sanctions report, I have no idea why, to a highly secure compound in the Afshar neighborhood in Kabul, which served as a training center for Taliban forces. Some member states know that Hamza al-Ghamdi, not the terrorist, al-Ghamdi is basically a very well-known tribal name in Saudi Arabia, was in the highly secured Sharshadang area in Kabul with his family. Individuals that are involved with middle management of Al-Qaeda, okay, that are being sent to the very rural areas of Afghanistan, not like Nangarhar and Kandahar and, the Paktia province, Masir-e-Sharif. These are all well-known areas where, the training camps were huge. And it could be easily infiltrated by foreign actors, right? And it goes down to the resolutions. Now, Resolution 2199 and 2462 on the financing of terrorism. This is the impact assessment report. And look what it says here. Al-Qaeda, Daesh, and affiliates retained access to revenue streams, notwithstanding sustained counterterrorism pressure. Where's this money coming from? Well, it's coming from the black market. Guns, weapons, drugs in Afghanistan. Remember, there is a large influx of heroin coming out of the province. Okay. Now, look what it says down here regarding Al Qaeda and the cultural heritage, right? What does it basically say regarding, Daesh? Daesh is basically saying that the report saying that Daesh is unchanged, that their methods have unchanged. And why should it change? They are basically getting support from the member states like Syria and Libya and North Africa, where they have a huge influence. Camps and prisons in the northeast of the Syrian Arab Republic continue to be a significant concern. Now, why would this be? Because data on the number of camps were uncertain, though most estimates 35,000 to 40,000 in the Hawal camp alone. These are terrorists. Who took over the fucking Syrian government? A terrorist. Imagine these numbers coming to the ranks. Syria will be the global, the center of the caliphate. It's them in Afghanistan. Daesh continue to prioritize trying to release fighting-age male prisoners. If successful, it would replenish its ranks and bolster its capabilities. Now, the monitoring team took note of the Security Council's concerns about the lack of implementation of the measures of ISIL and Al-Qaeda sanctions regime, including insufficient reporting by the member states to the committee. What did I tell you? With the State Department basically neglecting the terrorist threat, which is fucking looming here, this has led to the rebirth of these groups. No travel ban exemption requests were submitted to the committee during the reporting period, and no information was received from member states regarding attempted travel or interdiction of individuals designated on the ISIL and Al-Qaeda sanctions list. Why? Because of the simple problem that they related below. Member states continue to raise concerns regarding the lack of identifiers, the possible misspelling of names, the absence of biometric information, and the reluctance of some countries to share information regarding listed individuals. What countries? Oh, Syria. Why would they release information about Islamic fundamentalist individuals? Why would Afghanistan do it? Why would Pakistan do it? Right? Member states noted ongoing challenges and costs in ensuring that biometric collection systems were interoperable with national watch lists and advanced passport information. They're not coming by plane. They're coming through the open borders of Europe and the United States. Fucking shit. And who's going to get the blame for this? The Republicans, the dumb Trump supporters, are going to look at the Biden supporters. You did this. I fucking hate you, commie, right? And then you got the green hair communist looking at them and says, it's not our fault. Your dumb foreign policy made these people. Meanwhile, they're both ignorant regarding what precipitated the problem in the first place. It talks about arms embargo and assets freeze, but who gives a fuck? Because we lifted the sanctions on who? Abu Muhammad al-Jawani, the leader of Syria, and the group, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Now, there's another article. And this one is from the Bill Baggio article, right? I'm sorry, not Bill Baggio, Don Rassler, who wrote on the death of Ayman al-Zawahiri, succession challenges and trade-offs. Now, Don Rassler wrote a phenomenal book called The Haqqani Network, which was fantastic. And in this article, I want to point out something that I found to be really interesting. And in that, it talks about, Al-Qaeda, the question of Al-Qaeda and the sustainable for a leader, right? The question of al-Adl's sustainability for the role, whether he would be the right person. It is worth highlighting that at one point near the time of his death, bin Laden did not believe that al-Adl was the right fit to serve as a deputy. Now, it goes down a little bit, right? Here, right? Some analysts and entities have suggested that the leader of regional al-Qaeda allied groups based outside Afghanistan-Pakistan border may be another cohort of potential leadership candidates to replace al-Zawahiri. Now, no one's announcing names, right? At this point, this actually keeps al-Qaeda in the down low. And what I want to highlight here is that why they have not announced a leader. Now, it says al-Qaeda anointing a regional leader also comes with the risk that al-Qaeda's global brand may become more consumed with or influenced by or subsumed by the priorities and needs of that regional affiliate and the local conflict dynamics that shape its activity. Selecting a leader from a regional affiliated organization may also be a genie that is hard to put back in the bottle as it creates precedents, and perhaps the expectation that the next leader would be selected from that same regional group. This is also the issue of whether any regionally aligned al-Qaeda leaders would be a good fit, right? So they're not going to name a leader because they don't want to absorb other organizations' priorities. There is a single priority. It's the attack of the West. Now, it talks, it's a great article. It talks about the implications of the global jihadi movement, the leadership argument. And look what it says here. The death of al-Zawahiri has implications for the future of the global jihadi movement and its various components. And it is not just al-Qaeda that has suffered a big loss this year, but the Islamic State as well through their leaders, right? But given the death of al-Zawahiri and the recent death of Qurashi and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi before him, both groups are navigating important organizational inflection points. The moment and the circumstances of it raises the possibility that the global jihadi movement's two primary camps, those who support al-Qaeda, those who support the Islamic State, may soften their antagonism toward one another and potentially find pockets of common ground. What's the common ground of Islamic State and al-Qaeda? Israel, the West. What did Sarah Adams, what did Bill Baggio write and publicly state for the last 2 years? Just to keep it recent, that the groups have learned from their mistakes and they will coexist for a common enemy, making them far more formidable. But it needs help. And it got that help from the State Department and Department of Defense. Now, am I blowing smoke? Am I basically, saying that, I don't know, maybe I'm over exaggerating? Maybe I'm, don't know what I'm talking about, right? But let me fill you in on how these ranks could be replenished. What could make al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and what could make the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria a global threat? Because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about regional threats. We're not talking about lone wolf attacks. Well, you have to go back a little bit. Now, remember, when the United States left the Taliban to take over the country in 2021, what was the first thing that happened? Thousands of prisoners freed by Taliban could pose threat to the United States. If you have a cancer in your liver or in your lungs, do you ask the doctor to just take out 90% of it and the rest will be okay? Right? Taliban captured Bagram Air Base on Sunday and released thousands of prisoners, including many senior al-Qaeda operatives. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, through the Biden and Trump administrations that worked with the Taliban in Afghanistan, this is what happened. Estimates suggest that 5,000 to 7,000 prisoners were left behind the U.S. withdrawal. Why would they do this? 7,000. The prison, the Puli Cheriki is the largest in Afghanistan, contained a maximum security cell block for al-Qaeda and Taliban prisoners. Syrian Kurdish forces oppose handing jihadist jail cells to Islamist rulers. Hey, listen, I don't say anything unless I can back it up. And then I lead it up to you to put two and two together. The Kurdish forces guarding Islamic State fighters at a jail in northern Syria say they are opposed to handling the facility to the new Islamist rulers in Damascus as they brace for attacks by the ultra-hardline group and monitor its attempt to reemerge. The U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, a Kurdish-led force which holds a quarter of Syria, has said the Islamic State has already attempted 2 attacks on prisons in a bid to break out their comrades. At a prison in which Al-Qahash, where some 4,500 Islamic State fighters, including many foreigners, are incarcerated. Where are they going to get their numbers from? Here. And now you say, well, what about weapons? What about military armaments? Timber Sycamore, anyone? 20% of weapons sent to Kiev end up on a black market. Russians, UN miss it. How many billions have we sent to Ukraine in arms shipments? Billions. 20% of the weapons sent by the West to Kiev end up on a black market. Who's working with Islamic groups, far-right nationalist groups that exist in southern Russia, northern Ukraine? God knows what else in Poland and Germany and elsewhere. Then you got, Islamist groups that are right next door. It was in Uzbekistan, Dagestan, right? Cities like this. Waziristan, Tajikistan, and all the way down to Syria and Afghanistan. Folks, just put two and two together. All right. Good article back in 2016, Save Us from Today's Dr. Strangelove by Paul Malone. And look what he wrote here. Reports in the New York Times and Al Jazeera have taken up a step closer to understanding recent U.S. government shipments of arms from the Eastern European port of Constantinople in Romania to Aqaba in Jordan. And this is Timber Sycamore, where we supported millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons aid to Islamist groups that have now taken over Syria. Just 10 years later. Where these weapons just disappear? Those weapons helped to overthrow Assad and create the caliphate in Syria. So now you know where the weapons are. So now you know where the recruitment centers are coming from. By these by these prisons in Afghanistan and Syria, who held all these Islamists that were tortured, are now going to be released by the governments, which are jihadist networks supporting, that are running the governments in Syria and Afghanistan. This is where their ranks come from. The weapons, well, we gave them the weapons. Here's some toys. Now, what does this mean in the long run? Yeah, I did a video about 2 weeks back, what I think the next attack is going to be, how it's going to be after reading Sarah Adams' book, Al Qaeda 2.0. And she was one of many people that were involved with providing the intelligence in that book. I think that scenario is a lot more reasonable, a lot more paralyzing to the American consciousness. It will create fear, paranoia, and mistrust for not just within ourselves, but toward officials and elected leaders and even civil servants. Because I think that the attack will be more guerrilla oriented. They'll be dressed as either cops or military or EMS, somebody that imposes trust, but has access to weapons that are put in areas of sensitivity. Now, we've seen the reports, that's not proof of nothing, of missing military uniforms and bulletproof vests from police departments. Not to say that this hasn't been going on the last couple of years, but it is concerning that, you could have a black market for these things. And, you could always buy a military uniform or a police uniform or a security uniform in a, Dick's Sporting Goods, or buy it online through the black market. Weapons through the black market that are being sold. And all they need now is motivation. Well, what more motivation is there regarding the situation in Gaza? And for those people who support the Ukraine war, support, the Israel war in Gaza, for you right-wing, old-style constitutionalists that support the Israeli government because you're on their payroll, and to you Democrats that support the Israeli government because you're on their payroll, you are the ones that are not going to be victimized by this. You will be the benefactors because the Islamic fundamentalist groups that are born from your violence are going to help you create legislation imposing invasive civil liberties on the people, because that's the ultimate victim in all this. It's always the people. It's always the citizenry. It's nobody else. And it's going to hurt us in the long run, because what I think is going to happen, and I'm not saying it's gonna, but this would create, the real fear within each other that we're missing. And it's right there. I mean, we are like this close to just hating each other and creating pockets of civil war. I'm not saying an all-out civil war, but in terms of like creating a divisive paradigm within the American people, well, it's right there. And right now, the hotbed is politics. And racism is on the rise. I'm seeing more now of these alt media personalities that are like male influencers that are, of the ethno Christians kind. Right? Like, these aren't Christians, these are fakes frauds. And they are basically just coming out now on YouTube, creating content, saying, well, maybe we should, maybe the black issue, black fatigue, I'm starting to see. I'm like, what? This is to help create what? Divide within the country. And heaven forbid, if the scenario I think is going to happen, where Islamist groups will basically be 3 to 5 man units and shoot up areas within the major cities that will create, 1,000 deaths or 2,000 deaths real fast, which will create the harm to the tourism industry, and on top of it, um, show espouse discord within one another, because we won't trust one another, we won't go anywhere, and the COVID mandates that that were practiced during the COVID period will come to fruition here, because that's what I think was the basic, the main, the missing or the main conspiracy is that it wasn't about the virus; it was about our reaction to the mandates of the virus, and we failed. Right? Stand 6 feet apart, like viruses can't reach you at 7 feet, or create a plexiglass as the viruses can't go over the plexiglass and touch you. And, this is ridiculous. Now imagine those mandates, happen after the terrorist attacks that are going to come. Like, if they're going to come, they may not. I could be blowing smoke here. I'm willing to say I'm wrong. I hope I am. But I just think that with the latest foreign policy right now, it's just all ripe for it. But imagine those draconian, stupid policies, and like, stay away from a person who's going to be labeled either a Democrat or Republican, or just stay away from each other at such a distance in certain areas. I'm not saying public, the whole society, but in certain areas, like, press briefings, or, you know, stadiums or whatnot. I don't know. I could be wrong about this too. Stupid, but I could see it that way. I don't want to be near this Democrat, this communist. I mean, we're already thinking it on viral media anyway. I mean, people are really coming out, because this is what's going to happen. We're going to blame it on minorities, poor people, and the left, atheists, socialists, communists, every other ideology whatsoever. The Republicans and the Democrats have created this fanatical divide and created extremists with one another. They help to create each other, the fanatics on each side. General ignorance. That's what happened here. Now, I'll end it like this. Like Orwell said in 1984, if you don't want this to happen, don't let it happen. That's it. Plain and simple. We have the power to take back the power that was taken from us, from the people that we help elect to help us lead as a nation. But they are not for us. They're enemies to us. And they take away our rights and consolidate our power and help us create the divide that we're seeing right now. So don't let it happen. And always be vigilant and have faith in one another. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video. See you. Take care.